Welcome to Simply Sarah. I am so glad that you are here, that you've carved out time to be able to hear these words of incredible wisdom that are going to come through Gary Barnes today. He is an exceptional coach, somebody that so many people around the globe have been trained by and have followed in his footsteps. And we are delighted that he is here. Gary, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. We are just truly, this is a pleasure. Tell me how you got to where you are today, friend.
Well, and first, Sarah, thank you so much for this opportunity. I always feel very honored to be able to share and to be with an individual like you as well. Where I have been today, I think over the last few decades, the idea that people go into a certain occupation and they stay there for 40 years, get a gold watch, and retire and go off into the sunset has really changed because my journey is, if you look at my resume, my bio, they go, who in the heck is this guy? Because my early background was in theology and psychology, and I'm a certified police officer. I built a successful real estate career and then built one of the very first financial planning firms in the country, built it to the top 3% in production.
Yes.
And over the last 17 years after I sold that practice, um, I have been speaking around the world, internationally, nationally. My business coaching practice has taken off, and I'm an author, credited with 10 books now. And what's really strange is I didn't plan on any of it.
What is the gift inside of that, Gary, of not planning on any of it?
You know, there is something that I call the nudge. When I train speakers, I talk about sometimes we're on stage, and like you and I today, we're not scripted.
Right.
And when we have that sense of inspiration, that sense of knowing that there is something there to do or to have or to share, and to be able to honor that, most people think that nudge is us talking to us. I truly don't believe that. I believe it's an external source. I don't care what you really call it, whether it be God, infinite intelligence. It's an entity. It's a empowered source of knowledge. That's why I just mentioned to you before we came on the air that when somebody says to me, "Well, you're so brilliant," or "That's so great," or whatever, I said, "Well, I'm brilliant enough to listen. I'm smart enough to listen." And so when we really engage in honoring that nudge, we still have total, you know, uh, responsibility whether we activate it. But when we have that nudge, we start stepping into the unknown. And that's where most people really get stuck because we don't like change. We don't like the unknown. We want to have guarantees. You look at any product or service and you have these guarantees. And yet in life, there are no guarantees.
Right. I so love that you call it the nudge because for me, that is such a powerful word. I fully hear what you're saying with that. And I have watched it happen multiple times in my life. I never expected to have my own television show. I expected to be a teacher, I expected to be a music teacher. And when I got into education, I wasn't even doing that. I was using music in the classroom as a tool, but I wasn't teaching music and much until much later on. And serendipitously, multiple things happened in order for that to actually take place. And so, this space of seeing the next step or sensing the next step in front of us and being willing to take the step to move into that. Are there things that we can be doing to exercise that courage muscle?
Courage is an interesting thing. John Wayne, and some people today, I say John Wayne, they don't know who it is. But John Wayne was really that image, that person that I really looked up to growing up, and he never showed fear. And so I started having this concept that courage was the absence of fear. And so as I got older, I had the privilege of meeting a gentleman that was on the one of the first landing craft on D-Day.
Mhm.
And he said, the movies are great, but it wasn't the way his war was. His war was 1 inch on either side of his helmet. And there were buddies being killed on either side. And he knew if he stood still, he would die.
Right.
But he also knew that if he moved forward, that he could die, but he could also live. And
Right.
so I changed that concept of courage as action in the presence of fear.
Yes.
Fear is normal. It's natural. When we're walking into the unknown, there, I just said, there's no guarantees. In fact, one of the Indiana Jones movies, I think it was on where they were going after the Holy Grail, and there was a scene where Indy had to step off into what looked like nothing, but
Right.
as soon as his foot landed, there was a step, like
Yes.
the next step, and the next step. And that's also where sometimes we think our destination starts. You were just talking about your journey. Where
Right.
we thought our journey was going to be, it has the twists and turns, and then we have options of what we actually activate. And so when we have courage, people say, I want more courage, and or even confidence.
Mm.
And my question is, how can you have more of something? And it's almost like being a little bit pregnant. Either
Right.
you have it or you don't.
Yes.
It's the usability of it that really makes a difference. And so that one-on-one connection or talking to that person that may scare you in business, that
Mhm.
you built up this story about them, and we disconnect ourselves. This is the other thing that I see people do all the time is
Yes.
they discount who they are because what they see is ordinary and other people will see it as extraordinary.
Oh.
And so it's really stepping into the fear
Mm.
because fear allows us to see things in a more in tune way. It makes
Yes.
it actually safer. And so, but if we do nothing, if we just have that deer in the headlights, we're not just standing still, we're actually going backwards.
And the deer in the headlight, that whole idea of being frozen is something that costs so many deer their life, right? And I think that for us, when we choose to, or when we are in that space that fear has been activated and we don't take a movement, we don't seek help, we don't have a conversation with somebody that we admire, that for us can also be something that causes us to lose confidence in ourselves. And in a sense, that is a type of death, right? In terms of not moving forward and living and breathing into that next step. I really appreciate, Gary, what you said about this space of confidence, but the fear is something that is also teaching us, it's showing us, it's opening up doors, it's keeping us safe if we have a appropriate conversation with it. But it's also something that is helping us gauge where we are in terms of our aliveness. I guess that's a way of saying it.
Well, it's been said if we're not afraid, if we don't have a little bit of that tightness in our chest and in our stomachs, is
Mm,
that we're really not out there far enough. Because then we get very comfortable, we get complacent, we get
yes.
satisfied,
Hmm.
and to me, that's where we get left behind because everything is evolving, everything is growing.
Yes.
And when we start looking at economies and should I do this business or that business, well, there's questions to ask about the deliverable. Is it something that is really viable in the society at that moment?
Right.
But if you don't do it, someone else will.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so, if not you, or if not now, when?
It's so very, very true. Gary, as you look back over your life as and the people that you have touched, I would think that there'd be some who would say you have been really at spectrum's ends, right? Being a police officer, um, somebody who's willing to take risks for other people, but also at the height of financial advising, which is there's risk involved in that, but there's also a game plan that you can kind of lay out, right? Where every day as a police officer is going to be its very own unique experience. No 2 days will ever be alike. How do you embody all of these different gifts and talents that you have and honor them in the different ways that you have embraced the different jobs that you've held?
That's a great question. No one in all of my interviews has ever asked that. I mean, that is a wonderful question. And two things were coming up for me. One is listening. And in listening, I'm not thinking. I can actually put myself as much as possible into the equation
Mm-hmm.
and start understanding instead of just reacting. The
Yes.
other thing was the ability to ask questions. So there's been a number of volatile situations over my career in all of the different areas to where if I had reacted, it wouldn't have ended as successfully as in the ability to ask questions. There is a concept, the one that asks the question controls.
Mm,
And so, but really, it's not about for me the controlling, it's about the understanding
yes.
because as I go into it, I don't know what the motivation of the question is. I don't know where the question is coming from, or even if the person that's asking the question or making the statement uh, is understanding what their outcome is, what they're wanting as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so, my whole goal, whether it be when I was in the arena of the police department or in theology in the church environment, or which seems like two different things, which it is, but they complement. But it was about how to build relationships,
Mm-hmm.
how to build connections, but doing that without an agenda. If
Mm-hmm.
I have an agenda to an outcome, to a connection, to an opportunity, then I will naturally push you away because even if I don't say it, you will feel it. And I want to be that people magnet that when I connect with somebody, they want to come towards me, not go away from me.
Mm-hmm.
And we will have more honest communication and conversations that way.
Gary, how do you keep your expectations or desires or um, dreams and goals of a future outcome out of a conversation as you are connecting with someone? How are you able to stay so very present that it's just about connecting? Because you absolutely are a people magnet. I have seen you at a conference, and just the way that you were in an area where people could come and go, and you held the room. People were coming and coming having conversations with you. Some people were already working with you as their speech coach, speaking coach. Other people were coming in with other kinds of questions. Um, and you just sat there and freely gave the information, just like you are doing right now. How do you do that and hold the expectations of this might be a great future connection that could have a great financial outcome to your benefit?
Part of it is that expectation or the realization for me that the person, I may not be the right fit. It may not be the right timing. It may not be the right product or service. There's all those things, and those are not my decisions. See, and I've come through some of the old school trainings at how to overcome objections and how to convert faster. And I'm going, so one of my clients years ago asked me, "How do I convert faster?" And I said, "So are you asking me how to get somebody to do something that you want them to do when you want them to do it and not in their timing?" And they didn't like me, but they said,
Right.
"Okay, how do I build my business?" And really, that answer is to connect with more people.
Yes.
And so when we are free with our connections, I love making referrals.
Mhm.
I know that I'm not the perfect solution for every single person out there, but I could be that perfect connection source. And when we do this, and when we really believe in what, and I call it the law of reciprocal. I don't know if it's actually a thing out there, but when I help you, I know that the law of reciprocal says there is something coming back to me, but not
Yes.
necessarily directly from you.
Right.
And that's the thing. People think it's I give you, you give me, and in networking events and things like that. When I speak, and in fact, I did it right before we went through a little. process with you getting on, but I did something else.
Mhm.
I said a little prayer and said, let me touch one.
Yes.
And I don't know who that person is. I don't know when it will be. I
Mhm.
don't know if it will be. But that's my belief that
Yes.
when I get an opportunity to connect with somebody on a human level,
Mhm.
then there is something special about that. And so, yes, I have my goals. I have, but that's a side issue. I establish those, and then I'm a wordsmith. And so I really eliminated in my vocabulary, in my process, the word sell.
Mhm.
And I replaced it with the word share.
Mm.
And so whether if I can help somebody take the next step,
Mhm.
because here's something else that I know there's a number of us that have been around the industry for a long time. And when we were coming up, nobody wanted to help us because they looked at us as being their competition if they did.
Right.
And so, if I can help another generation, if I can help another human being make a difference,
Mhm.
I think that's part of the process. But we have to still remember to and really allow other people to know what we do as their benefit.
Mm.
So, if it is the right timing, if it is the right fit, that they have permission to come towards us. Because
Yes.
sometimes they will discount themselves and say things like, I'm not that good or I'm not ready. Well, what tells you that? You
Right.
know,
Yeah.
and so, or they read your resume and they go, whoa, golly, I can't talk to them. There's, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
But I really think it's that. It's where we're really in tune to more of the connection than the end result.
Mhm. Someone I have a great admiration for is Lori Paley. She owns a skin and body shop in Claremont, California, and she's an esthetician. She's the spa owner. She is somebody who is really looked up to in the community. And one of the things that she does every single year is go to the junior college and she speaks and she shares different things that are working currently, things that she's doing. But one of the very first things that she says to them is, I'm sharing this with you, and some of you may come work with me, and some of you may be my competition. I'm sharing this information freely because it makes us a better community by doing this. And I hear your heart in this, Gary, also, because you are absolutely right. There was in a previous time a mentality that if I put my hand out to help you with a connection, with you could do it this way, it might work a little bit faster, easier, better, anything like that, it was seen as if you were giving your competition an edge up. And I'm really glad to see that so many places and so many industries that is shifting and changing, and mentorship is showing up in a really deeply influential way where people are just coming and sharing and saying, you can do it that way if you want to, but there are other ways that you can consider. And as you look at all of them, then make the best decision for what you want to do and how to move forward.
Well, one of the questions that I ask people quite a bit, whether they on my financial planning days or in my business coaching, speaking coaching, is if they tell me about their coach, I go, if you're happy there, great. But what can I give you that with no expectation? And the unique thing that many times happens is they will refer someone to me, even though they're not using me as their coach,
Right.
because I was a safe person and was willing to help them without a hook.
Yes. Yes. So incredible. We're going to take a quick break here. We will be right back. And I so appreciate the wisdom that you are sharing with all of us. We are having a dynamic conversation with Gary Barnes. He has done so many different things in his life, and he's not done yet. In fact, as we were talking this last week in preparation for our conversation today to share with you, one of the things he said to me is, have you written a book? And I said, yes, I have several books, and talked a little bit about them. And he says, you have one more book, at least one more book to write. And it's about your own story. And so I so appreciate that he is spreading these beautiful seeds of encouragement and planting these visions in people's lives. It's truly, truly incredible to be able to spend time with you, to be with you. Gary, I just curious in this space of you doing all these different things, were there people in your growing up years that gave you permission to not do just one thing, but that gave you permission to do more than one thing?
Actually, it was the opposite. I grew up in a very abusive home. I was the oldest of three, and I took the brunt. I was what I describe as the special honored child, and to the point that my brother and sister did not even know what was happening to me.
Yeah.
I was also told that I could not do. Every time I came up with something, I can't do that. You're not worthy. You're not a. You know, it was. I told my mother one time that I was going to be a millionaire, and she said, "You have to be a crook to be a millionaire." And there was, when I went into the ministry, said, "You can't be a minister. You have to have a calling from God." And when I left the formal ministry, she said, "You're going to hell because you're turning your back on God." I could not win.
You could not. Yeah.
And so more of my personality is that I didn't want, instinctively, I didn't want to continue on the cycle.
Right.
My dad was a loving guy. I mean, he owned service stations. He was a mechanic. He was one of those guys that could invent and fix anything, but he didn't believe in himself. He
Wow.
always put himself down. He just never actualized who he actually was.
Mm,
And so it was one of those situations of I had to go outside of my environment to find the permission to step into all the different things that I have done. And my first mentor was actually Jim Rome.
yeah.
And some people remember back with Jim, I was
Yes.
in his original, my wife and I were in his original program called Adventures in Achievement. I
Yeah.
still have the little cassettes in the briefcase that came in.
Yes.
Tony
Yes.
Robbins was actually in the front row when he was living in his Volkswagen Bug, because Tony or Mark was Tony's first mentor as well.
Mm,
And so it's just one of those things that as I started giving myself more and more permission,
mm,
this is where there is something else that I really started to realize is that as long as I was looking for external validation,
mhm.
permission from others, I would always be wanting. But
Yes.
when I gave it to myself, when it was internal,
Mhm.
that it would never be perfect, but it would always be enough.
Yes.
And so when I started looking at that, I was willing to step into what some people would call failure.
Mm,
Produce events today. My very first event, uh, way back in the day, uh, I had Dennis Waitley coming. I had some people that were, yeah, I go back a ways. And so it was going to be at the Orange Coast Hotel in
mhm,
Irvine, California.
mhm.
And this was long enough ago. I had my wife said I said I invested over $25,000. In today's dollars, it would be almost $100,000,
Yes. Yes.
and I didn't have one person show up, none. But if I hadn't done that, I wouldn't be doing what I am today because it was a learning experience. Now, I don't recommend people do that,
I understand. Yes. Yes.
but I had nobody to teach me.
Mhm,
So I was out there doing it by experience, and some things didn't work, but a whole bunch of things did.
mm,
And so giving my personality, and it's just like people have taught over the years that you have a niche, you have a personal, you know, type of person you want to work with, industries you want to work with. And if I'd done that, I would have been bored out of my mind.
yeah.
So my specialty is my niche, if you will, is pain points. So
Mm,
I have industries, all spectrum of industries. I have all genders. I have religions, whatever countries, and it's because of the pain points, and it keeps me interested. And that's
Yes.
why when people ask me, well, what does your Tuesdays look like? I go, which one?
Right. Yeah. I really appreciate that you vulnerably shared about your growing up years and how that gave you permission. And I hear your heart because I know of other people who have also been in very similar situations in family dynamics where they were, my words, the scapegoat, but it was done in such a way that the other siblings weren't necessarily aware of it, and just how truly unfair, and yet you have chosen to overcome. And so, in spite of not being able to do anything right at any turn, that you have learned to give yourself that permission. Did you come up across things that felt like upper limits, that were like maybe glass ceilings, or things that you felt like this may be one that was going to not be one that would work for you?
Really, it came to all of the self limiting beliefs.
Yes.
I mean, I had uh, in my financial planning career, there was a company I was working for, and they literally fired me. And I said I was going to earn so much money for someone the next year, and they said, not here. I
Mm.
have failed every sales exam that I've ever taken, and yet I've sold over $300 million of products and services through my career.
Yes.
And so it's those, again, a little bit of the external, but is the internal is, do I deserve? I
Mhm.
think that is the major negative beliefs that I have found throughout any of the countries and people I've worked with. It's just, we don't put ourselves in a position of receiving.
Yeah.
And I ask audiences all the time, is it better to give or to receive? And most of the time, people say it's better to give. And
Yeah.
then I follow up with a question, how can you give without first receiving?
Exactly.
And so it's a symbiotic relationship. It's
Yes.
that if we receive, my mother was somebody that was a hoarder, and she believed that she was going to have somebody steal everything, and literally a family of gypsies at the end did. And so
Imagine.
that self-fulfilling prophecy,
Yes.
but that ability to step into the unknown and saying, did it work? Did people, there's, I've always said I couldn't be a politician because 50% of the population didn't vote for you, and half of those people want to shoot you.
Right.
It was just
Yes.
like, it just, but yeah, the encouragement that we have at times, but I think it really comes down to understanding what it is and why it is you do what you do.
Mhm.
When you understand that at a deep emotional level, it's not about money. Money is a milestone.
Yeah.
Once you get back past the dollars, what do the dollars do?
Right.
It's a process that I call so what to so that.
Yes.
Is that as we continue on down, now that we are waking up every morning for a different reason.
Mhm.
Jim Rohn always had this saying. He said, no one ever gets up and gets excited about going out and paying their bills.
Right.
You've got to get beyond that. It goes beyond the sustenance to a, what am I serving with and how am I compensated? So there's that two sides of the coin, that
Mm.
what it is that I'm benefiting for someone and what is it benefiting me.
Yes.
And when we do that, it won't feel normal, natural as soon as we do it, because we're not taught to do that. We're taught to serve others and give and give and give. But when we do that, we're actually opening up a larger potential of receiving, so
Mhm.
that we're able to give even at a higher level.
Wow. So profound. Gary, as you think about somebody who is just beginning to start their own business. They have maybe had some education about what business could or should look like. Could be the school of hard knocks, could be having gone to school, business school, or something to learn about it. In that space, they are now determined that this is the time in their life that they want to start out and do whatever this calling is, whatever the nudge is. They're going to follow through on that. What advice would you give that person?
Oh, golly, these are great questions. First, Stephen Covey said, start with the end in mind.
Yes.
most of the time we start with the beginning and then have to figure out what it is that we're going to do with it.
Yeah.
And this is like with products and services, well, I have a great idea. It's something that's needed. I create the product and I go out and promote it. Well, no, we go out and see what the people want, come back and create it, and then give it to them.
Yes.
And so that is something that um, is really critical, is to understand the process of what you're wanting to deliver that's going to be of a benefit to a certain group of people. Identifying where those people are. How do they take in information? Where are they? How to use their language. A lot of
Mm-hmm.
times, the people that we're serving are opposite personalities of who we are
So often.
because they need what we have and I need what they have. So it's a different side to it. I learned from one of my previous coaches a couple of sayings that will keep you broke faster than any other. And the first is, yeah, but I like it.
Yeah.
I don't care if I like it. It's whether or not the person I'm serving likes it.
Right.
And the other is, yeah, but I think.
Mm.
And so we're reflecting back onto us.
Yeah.
But it's most of the time it's how do you create a business plan? And I'm not a real big proponent on creating a formal business plan,
Mm.
but to not have a roadmap to start with to know if you're on track or off track.
Right.
And part of it is learning how to be a real business, not just a fly by night. Here's it something, and I'm just going to throw it out there.
Yeah.
Particularly when you look at revenue, it's not how much money you make; it's how much money you keep.
Yes.
The only people that can run a business in the deficit is the federal government, and they don't make money anyway,
They
and
print it.
airlines. And think about airlines. I mean, they lose money every year, but they get subsidies.
Right.
And so the thing that having more knowledge is, the things that you don't know can come back and really bite you bad, even if you have a good model.
Yes.
So having that base, it doesn't have to be complicated again, but having that roadmap for the first 6 months to a year
Yes.
and seeing what works. There's another concept that I have coined a phrase around. They call them Garyisms. Is launch and adjust, but
Yes.
you don't. It's a marathon, not a sprint. So you don't just throw a whole bunch of things, throw a whole bunch of money at things.
Yeah.
Um, this is my mind's racing here because another thing that happens is that when we get into something that we don't know, we want to give away our empowerment
Mm.
because I can throw money at you and say, and they're making all these promises,
Right.
but if there's hollow promises, now I've spent money, not invested money.
Right.
And the difference is when I invest, I expect a return on that investment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I love these Garyisms. Um, if you were talking to somebody who has been doing their business for a while and they have gotten to a place that they just feel like they have plateaued, they kind of feel like wilted lettuce. They've been doing it, they know how to do it. It had an idea, and it's making income, but the joy of life has really gone out of what they're working on. What advice would you give that business person?
To step back and listen.
Mhm.
I had the honor of speaking on the same stage with Marshall Goldsmith.
Mm.
He's ranked as one of the top thinkers in the world.
Yes.
And his book, What Got You Here Will Not Get You There.
Mhm.
And so this is again, we get very complacent in the things that we are doing. It feels very comfortable, but to go to that next level is doing something different.
Mhm.
When we went through COVID, we had to adjust, and everything was online. And now it's online, and the international communities are more tied together than they were before COVID,
True.
which was a tremendous benefit.
Mhm.
But I think the thing that is interesting is that so many people are hiding in plain sight.
Mhm.
Is they have a great product or service, and the change is not to change the product or service, is to change how they're being seen in the public. And that can be scary because now people may not like you. And I was just one of my clients today said one of our other clients was talking during they didn't there was people that didn't like her, but they said, and there's people that don't like Gary. And I'm going, yeah, I know. It just like it's normal and natural. And
Right.
so, but if that old adage, build it and they will come,
Mm,
unfortunately, is a lie.
it is.
And so we to be seen, that's actually there's a three-step process that I teach around. And the first is to be seen, in all the different ways. Get on stages. People are so afraid of getting on stages because they're saying, and this is a stage, by the way, and then we're just
Yes.
having a conversation.
Yes.
And the stages I may flub up. I flub up all the time.
Yeah.
It just all people want is being real. And if you have something to share that's really in tune to who you are, that's
Mhm.
what people want. The
Yeah.
second step was to be safe. Again, we talked about that a little bit already.
Mhm.
No agenda.
Yeah.
It is that when you do that, people will be drawn to you. And the third thing is relevant. So
Mm.
if somebody has plateaued, the relevant area is also really important to look at because do people want it or just do you think they need it? And maybe they do need it.
Yeah.
I ask health professionals all the time, do Americans want to be healthy?
Mm.
And most of the time they say, of course they do. I go, then why is McDonald's the number one restaurant in America? What do Americans really want? Fast, tastes
Fast and
good,
easy.
and it's not as cheap as it used to be, but cheap.
Yeah.
When do Americans want to be healthy? And it's when they're sick. And they go, well, do I have to change what I do? I go, no, you have to change your messaging.
Yeah.
You have to change and show the benefits of not getting sick. There's other ways of doing it, and just saying, do this for X.
Right. Yes.
And so I think that we all get stuck at times. The other thing that I find is that things that really worked when we got started, we stopped doing for whatever reason. We got bored or whatever it might be.
Right. Yeah.
All they may need to do is look back and really analyze,
Yeah.
okay, what was working when I started that I'm not doing now?
Yeah.
And reapplying, re-engaging in those things.
Oh, I'm just soaking all of it in. This is so, so, so good. My next question for you, Gary, has to do with a hypothetical. Um, if you could have a conversation with anybody, and they might be somebody who's already transitioned, somebody who's alive, somebody who speaks a different language than you, whatever, but that you could sit and have a conversation with that particular person, who would it be and why would you choose that person?
Oh, golly. One of the interesting things that I did years ago was create a board of directors, and most of the people on the board were no longer with us.
Yes.
Uh, I because I know there's no one that is perfect.
Mm-hmm.
So my answer is going to be a number of people.
Good.
One is Walt Disney.
Yes.
I know he had his flaws, but he had the ability to see things that weren't there and to create and really connect to his imagery and imagination.
Yes.
Another is to go back and have more conversations with Jim Rome.
Yes. Definitely.
Uh, the wisdom of Jim was amazing, and it was so organically simple that it wasn't this big convoluted process.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I would love to have a conversation with Abraham Lincoln.
Mm-hmm.
The ability to not only know him as a person, but
Yes.
to get into his psyche of the pain that he must have felt going through the process of the Civil War
Yes.
and the the conflict within himself.
Yes.
Uh, I would love to have a conversation with Aristotle,
Mm.
Socrates. My whole style is Socratic. I found that out after I had been doing it for years, and I saw something on the Discovery Channel, I think it was, and it said, "Oh, that Socrates did," and you go, "Oh, it's called Socratic." I'm doing something that I thought I made up. Uh, Christ is another one.
Mm-hmm.
Is instead of looking at all of the splinter sections, that we have today in the world, what was it that his pure intention
Mm.
was to give the world?
Yes.
Uh, so there's Even some of the maybe Genghis Khan and some of the people that have, in some ways, we look at them as very evil, combative individuals. But on the other side of what was their benefit to their society?
Right.
What was the ultimate uh, process there? Eisenhower. I would love to sit down with Eisenhower. Even though he would be very gruff, I would love to sit down with George Patton.
Hmm.
It's just so there's so many people in history. I don't read fiction books. I only read, most of everything I read is biographical
Yes.
because I want to know the story behind the story.
Hmm.
But to me, it's the pieces of all of these individuals, and there's so many more,
Yes.
that would give me clues and cues uh,
Hmm.
to be able to piece together who I am. What
Hmm.
works for me to reject the things that don't,
Right.
and to come up with who I am as an individual, and also to say, oh, that was their philosophy back then. There's nothing new under the sun. And
Yeah.
somehow I got it within me anyway.
Yes.
And so that was a little bit of a kaleidoscope.
Mm.
So I do apologize for
Oh
that.
no, that's a beautiful kaleidoscope. Who was the person who inspired you to create a board of directors and that gave you permission or inspired you to choose people who weren't necessarily living today?
Norman Vincent Peale. Norman Vincent Peale wrote a book, and I think it's in this book, called Enthusiasm Makes the Difference.
Mm.
And again, I'm a wordsmith, and the word enthusiasm, you break it down into the root meaning. The first part is ichthus, is God,
Yes.
ism is within. The word
Yes.
enthusiasm is literally God within.
It's beautiful. Yes.
And so when we have this, and I think he had that concept of building this board of directors of, and also looking outside of ourselves. John Wayne, like I said, was one of
Yes.
my, inspirational heroes growing up. Um, but what allowed them to do what they did? And
Mm.
to take these people in, particularly in history, is to be able to look around and say, what allowed you to do what you did? What are some similar situations that you lived through and the actions you took, and what results were they?
Mm.
And so, as we do that and just open ourselves up to the ability to listen again,
Mm.
someone that is alive that I actually know, that I want to give a shout out to. I just had a dream that I was talking to him last night. Glenn Morshower.
Mm.
People probably don't know who Glenn is, but if you look up on the internet, thatguy.com, he
Mm.
is a character actor. He is very prolific out there. But when you hear him speak, it's amazing. And truly, he is one of the best listeners that I've ever come across in my life.
Oh.
And so, really taking the idea that it's not about me,
Mhm.
and that I am a conduit, and that I am a bridge, if you will.
Mhm.
And what can I leave from what I have from them to others?
Yes. Mm. I'm making those mental pictures of what a bridge looks like and also a conduit. Both of us have lived in Southern California, and there's that conduit that brings the water in, right? And how amazing that is. It just flows. And then that concept of being a bridge, and the bridge is going to have an area between it that's going to be divided for some reason. And to be able to leave a place for people to be able to pass over, to cross from one thought process into another thought process. But the bridge goes both ways, right? They can pick up some ideas from here and then go back over to their side and possibly cross pollinate those ideas that are in that space.
Well, and that really connects to the concept that for every challenge, there is a solution.
Mm.
And when we think about how the suspension bridges were created back in the 17, 1800s, is they would take a bow and arrow and put a string and shoot it across,
Mm.
and that would be an idea. and then the person on the other side would send it back, and they'd keep doing that until they could get a rope, and then they get a piece of steel, and then they'd have a cable, and they keep doing it. That's how they connected. But it wasn't just one side building it and hoping to connect on the other side. It was literally that suspension bridge was in connection with both sides supporting each other in different ways.
Ah, I didn't know that that's how they began that process, but it totally makes sense. Growing up in Africa, it'd be somebody taking a vine on one side and they'd throw it to the other side. And depending on how strong people were or how important it was for them to get across, how soon, depended on how developed that bridge was from one side to the other. My mom has some of the best stories to tell about bridges in Africa, in Congo specifically. I know that you have written so many books, but you also have a special offer that you would love to be able to share with our audience today.
One of the things that I really believe in is when someone engages with anyone for their first time, I ask audiences, what are they buying? And they'll say them, their product, or whatever. And I go, at the very basic level, they're buying borrowed belief
Right.
because at that moment they have no experience in knowing what they're being sold or offered is going to do what it was touted to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so I do a breakthrough business mastery Q&A mastermind twice a month on Zoom. It's an international group, and my free gift is to have anyone that would like to participate for 30 days. You get 2 sessions within that group
Beautiful.
to come on for free. And they can go to freegiftfromgary.com, and it's totally free. There's no, I don't want a credit card. I don't want, it just,
Just come.
and even if they're not able to come at the time that we do it,
Mm-hmm.
we send out the MP3 and the MP4, the video and the audio the very next day.
Yes.
And so it's a great place to connect with an international community, to
Mm-hmm.
businesses and people of all walks of life and backgrounds. And it would just be, something that if people would like to come out and, the 31 flavors, the little pink spoon, uh, is to come out and just see if it's a community where I moderate, but we have people that really it becomes a mastermind because there's things that I don't know that other people in the group have more experience in and expertise in.
Mm-hmm.
That it truly is a giving group that way as well.
Yeah. And again, that taking apart the competition, right? It's a spirit of cooperation. Come learn, come and share, and let's see what we can build individually, perhaps even together. And that spirit of cooperation, I think, is transforming at such deep levels the work that people are doing.
It really is, and it's that exposure outside of your community. I was working with one of my individual coaching clients this morning, and we were talking about, are you in the right pond?
Mm,
And the people in her pond are not wanting to engage in a way that's going to be beneficial for either of them. I go, you need to step out of that pond into a wider pond.
yes.
And and this is the process that I really have come to enjoy because uh, it's a very low investment if they do stay on, but it's a total option.
Yeah.
It's only $27 a month. I mean, it's
It's
low.
remarkable.
Uh,
Remarkable.
but it's really about the community, not about profit.
Yeah.
And so it's and we so enjoy doing it. So and everyone is different because people will bring anything that they have questions about or
Mhm.
need help with or they're struggling with.
Mhm.
And because it's a very supportive group, it becomes very close.
Mm. That whole spirit of cooperation also helps to lower the stress level, which then in turn allows the brain to be able to problem solve differently and also then allows the brain to begin to creatively create in a different way as well.
Well,
Gary, go
I
ahead.
think that what it does is, as entrepreneurs, small business owners, speakers, whatever it is, we're very segmented. We're secluded.
Yeah.
We don't go into an office with 30, 40, 50, 100 or more people where we have that outside. Maybe it's also competition out there, But we have a tendency to start thinking that everybody is struggling or that we're the only people struggling with this and there's something wrong with us.
Mm.
When we broaden our community to where, uh, there's life happens. People ask me, am I a life coach or a business coach? And I say, I'm a business coach that includes life. I
Yes.
don't believe you can separate the two.
The
So
full
when
person.
people truly care, then that's when magic happens.
Yeah. It is when the magic happens. Tell us a little bit about some of your books.
The first book, I never planned on writing. I hate writing. I truly do. I never learned how to write or type. And I read very slowly.
Mm.
But in 1988, I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, and I was told I would be dead or in a wheelchair within 10 years. And so nobody wants to give you money as a financial planner if they think you're going to die. So I never
True.
told anybody. And so about 17, 18 years ago, when I sold the practice, people kept telling me, you need to tell the story. And so I birthed the first book called How a Beaver Saved My Life.
Mm.
And it was a visualization, it's all the story, but it's an adversity book about how to overcome adversity. And so the process that I write with is I am the subject, or I actually speak with, I am the subject, but not the message.
Right.
And so have it be applicable for people. It's the most requested talk that I do.
Mm.
Another book is called Spend and Grow Rich. And that is a book that people think it's about investing, and it's not. It's about spending. I believe budgets don't work because they're wrong every single month and people just won't do it. But
Yeah.
literally, some people spend and grow rich, and other people spend and grow poor.
Yes.
It's not about that. So I created a two-tier spending plan that's in that book. The last book we just re-released it is called The Power of Get Statements,
Mm.
where affirmations are good, but I think affirmations really have a limitation because many times what we have as an affirmation, we look in the mirror and we go, that's a lie. Or we look in our bank account and go, that's a lie. And so I redid it and created a process that states a future result
Yes.
in the present tense. And
Mm.
so now we're being pulled towards that reality.
Yes.
And I created an acronym for the word GET.
Mm.
It's Great Expectations Today.
Ooh, yes.
I'm rewriting now a my power or uh, oh the book of Garyisms.
Oh,
People,
good.
I'm redoing that one because the one that came out I don't even mark it. But we're expanding that, and then like I said, I've been credited now with 10 books, but those are the main ones.
Ah, beautiful. Well, Gary, as we wrap up our conversation, is there anything that you'd like to reiterate before we say goodbye to our audience?
You know, my encouragement to everyone is something we started with this morning, this today, uh, is when you have the nudge, really look at it. The launch and adjust. That's another Garyism. Is that we don't know why or sometimes why. We want to understand the why, and usually
Mm.
the why doesn't matter.
Right.
The why will show up. Why am I calling this person? And if anybody has ever had this happen where you think about a person, you call them and they go, oh, I was just thinking of you. Or,
Yes.
and we're going, whoa, how does that happen? It's magic. Uh, but if we don't step into and have the courage to step out, really what we're doing is not giving the people around us the permission to do the same thing. When I talk to leaders and do anything around leadership, I ask people, what do leaders do? And
Mm.
they'll give me all the fancy reasons. I go, well, leaders lead.
Yeah.
And leaders don't ask permission to lead. Leaders don't look for an external validation to lead. Leaders lead. It's just who you are. It doesn't take a personality to do it. Each and every person that I look at has a place on a stage, place in business, place to impact people if they'll just go ahead and have
Mm.
faith. See, most people, when I ask people if they have faith, they go, yes. I go, have you ever used it? And they go, well, no. I said, so you have a parachute that you've never opened.
Yeah.
And so have faith enough that it's not that the net will appear, but when we hit the ground, we bounce.
Yeah.
And to take that step into the unknown, because literally we would not have anything, we would not be able to do this if some group did not take the risk into the unknown and said, it is possible.
Yeah. Thank you, Gary, so much for this just fabulous conversation. It's empowered me. It's empowered so many others. I know that you came in wanting to impact one life, and I know that you for sure have done that. And we look forward to further conversations in the future. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. It's been a pleasure to be here.